For me, let's say I'm wrong about a growth stock. It's not the end of the world for me. I'm going to be wrong about stocks. Like I go into every investment I ever make, right? Knowing that there's a potential that I'm going to have to sell that stock for a loss someday. It is a realistic potential. And so as long as you're diversified, you can make it through those bad stocks. That's how I make it through bear markets. I've made it through several bear markets now at this point in time. I've made it through several bad stocks that I didn't see them going so bad and they went super bad. And it's like, oh my gosh. Um, that's, diversity is so important. It is so important. And, that's one of the things like I preach so much because a lot of people just risk too much in one or two stocks. And it's great when it works. But the problem is, all you need to be wrong is one time. If you're super
Yeah.
heavy in a stock and it's devastating your portfolio, it's devastating your net worth, and then it takes years to climb back to just where you used to be. Never mind, where you're trying to go. So that's one thing that's probably not talked about enough.
No, absolutely. And this is actually a pretty highly contested topic, at least here in the dividend investing community. One big question that a lot of people who watch my videos have is like, how many stocks should I be invested in? And I mean, the answer is obviously it depends. And this is something I've been trying to think on more. I mean, for the beginner investor, there's always ETFs and mutual funds and more passive ways to invest, which I want to get your thoughts on in just a moment. But something I've been thinking about more lately is that question, how many stocks is too many? I mean, number one, how many stocks, if you're going the individual stock route, how many can you keep track of? How many quarterly earnings calls can you listen to? How many financial statements can you keep up with? How much news can you handle on a daily basis or a weekly or monthly? That's certainly a component to it, but even so, it depends what kind of stocks you're investing in. If you're going to invest in ones that are maybe a bit more speculative, maybe their cash flows are not as certain, well, kind of like you're saying, maybe you need to be spread out a bit more. But with those, there may be some more variance in the returns, either good or bad, from the rest of the market. And so, kind of like you were saying, if you really lose out on one, if you're highly concentrated into one or a few particular holdings with that style of investing, you might get burned pretty bad. I mean, the potential for returns are pretty great too, but it could go the opposite way that you're hoping. And so, in that instance, probably makes sense to cast a wider net. And even doing so, because the potential for extreme returns is there, it might take one stock to really make a huge difference in your portfolio, right? Like, has that been the case for you? I know you have, dude, you've got a few positions that have just gone insane, absolutely insane. Like your Tesla, I can't even fathom those returns. But would you say that's been the case where it's been one or two? I know you're up on quite a few stocks, but it's been those one or two that have generated those like out in space returns that have made the difference for your portfolio?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you don't need very many stocks to become, let's call it grand slams. All you need is a few, and it's like changes your life completely and changes your portfolio trajectory completely. The great thing about stocks is the worst case scenario, you buy a stock and literally they go bankrupt. It goes to zero, you sell for a 100% loss, right? Worst case scenario, as long as you're not on margin or something like that, right?
Right.
The great news with stocks is you pick a great stock. I mean, it can 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x, 30x, 50x, 100x. Like there's no limit to how much money you can make. So if you put $10,000 in this stock, it goes to zero, and you put 10,000 in here and it goes to 50K. Yeah, you're still doing let's call it very, very well for yourself, right? So I think that's one of the things that's probably missed when it comes to investing, because people think you need to, they have a false assumption that you need to win every stock. You need to make money every stock. You can never lose money. Just not how math works. And I just wish people spent a little more time in the math classroom than whatever they spend their time on TikTok or whatever, because,
Yeah.
you just run the numbers and you see, like, if you just have a few game changers, like the public count, for instance, two game changing stocks, ELF and Tesla, like ELF sitting on, I don't know, 1,600% gains or something. And obviously Tesla sitting on some massive gains. And so those are just game changers that just level you up and just like, they almost wash away anything you kind of do that's like, something that didn't go the right way. Let's just put it that way. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, but those sorts of opportunities are harder to come by in the market. It's not like every stock's a 10x opportunity.
Mm.
So, you're going to miss some when you're trying to go after those stocks. And that's a level of variance you have to get used to. And that's tough for some folks to mentally get there. realizing, damn, like this, I'm taking a risk here, and this one might not hit, and I might sell for 50% loss, 70%, 90% loss, or something like that, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely, like you said, not for the faint of heart. It's definitely a challenge. So, but
That
investing
that's like
involves risk.
level that's like level 20 stuff for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you're going
Yeah.
boss mode when you get to that level. And then on the other, just sticking to diversification, on the other side of that, if you are going more stable companies with more predictable cash flows, then maybe it could make sense to have a smaller batch of stocks. Maybe you could, instead of having 30 to 40, maybe you only need 15 to 20 if you're going the individual stock route. But then again, there's always the ETF route. What do you think about a more passive approach to investing? Because you're a very active investor. You pick all of your stocks. From what I know, I don't think you have any mutual funds or anything like that, right? You're
None.
100% individual stocks.
Yep. Never
So
been index fund guy. Never mutual
yeah.
funds. Go ahead.
So I mean, what do you think about a passive approach to investing? Because there's been others like yourself who are strictly active investors, like Peter Lynch. I think he called passive investing, this was a couple of years ago, called it a mistake. Do you have any thoughts on passive investing, or what do you think
Yeah.
about all that?
So, I mean, passive investing still comes with risk. A lot of people look at it as like a risk-free proposition, which
Yeah.
is just not true. Like, there's still significant risk. Even Stanley Druckenmiller was talking about like a stagnation in the market for this decade, right, where you don't get any returns, and that would be pretty devastating if you're only in index funds, right? But I think a lot of it comes down to, do you enjoy and like to put in the work toward investing? Like, I love listening to conference calls. I love putting in the work and researching stocks and keeping up with the news and things like that. To me, that's fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun for everybody. It's very similar to like entrepreneurship, right? Some people like to work for a company and 9 to 5, and as soon as it's 5 o'clock, they're out. Don't talk to me. Don't call me. That's fine, right? Other people are like, no, I'd rather be on all the time. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to run my own business, run my own show. And so it's a very similar phenomenon in the stock market, where most people are kind of like the 9 to 5 employees. They don't want to have to research. They don't think that's fun. They think that's lame, and they don't want to do all that, right? And so for those folks, like, index funds is perfectly fine, right? But for some of us, that's just not good enough. Like, we want to put in the work. We love this. We enjoy it. We enjoy having our money in the stocks that we believe in for the next 5, 10 years, whatever. And we'd rather die on our sword than die on somebody else's. And we'd rather live on our sword and bet on ourselves rather than bet on somebody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what it really comes down to. And there's definitely a lot of people that like to pick individual stocks and do their own research and invest their own portfolios, and that's great. And that's most of the people that watch like my channel, for instance, and I'm sure most of the people that watch your channel. And then there's a batch of folks that they don't care about that, and that's perfectly fine. This world's got many opportunities for many different folks.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely,
that,
man. Definitely more than one way to skin the cat. I remember, like, I mean, when I came into investing with no experience whatsoever. I had no background in finance. I did not know how to read an income statement or a balance sheet or anything like that. I was totally lost when I first got into this stuff. And I, when I first got started, I went, for better or for worse, I went all individual stocks, and kind of have learned as I've gone along. Obviously, still have so much to learn, but have certainly come a long way. But it's like you said, man. It's for some people, they look at all this stuff that comes with investing in individual stocks and think that's too much work. I don't have the time for that. But I don't know. For guys like us, that's where the fun is. And if you would have told me like 5 years ago that I would be this interested in looking at all this stuff and thinking about all this stuff, and furthermore talking about it to the world, I would have thought you were on drugs or something. I just would not have seen it in any reality. And it's it's kind of interesting. Like, I think of my portfolio and the stocks that I buy and own almost as like an extension of you and the way that you think about the world and what you think is going to happen. And I think, like I said, that's where the fun is. It's fun to think about all this stuff and try and think about how these things are going to play out and see if you're right or wrong. But yeah, I guess it's certainly not for everyone, huh?
yeah. And no, that's a phenomenal point. Well put by you there.
Thank you.
You know, Yeah, for me, it's so much fun. It is so much fun, and I just love like the control of controlling my own money and those sorts of things. I just always like really enjoyed that. It gives you a different outlook on life. I think it really does. When you really go down that rabbit hole and you look at the world differently, like you never
Yeah.
realize like how until you really get into stock market investing, like looking into companies and this whole business landscape and investing, you don't realize how like ignorant you were before. And some say ignorance is bliss because I still remember like, when I was starting to get into stuff, 18, 19, 20 years old, just like starting to look at everything in the world differently from a different lens and just understanding like, oh, why that company over there is having a sale on that product. And oh, I see why they're discounting that over there. And wow, they must be getting a really good margin over here. And you start looking at the world totally differently than any average person, and you start you go to anywhere, you go to the strip at Vegas, right? And you be
Yeah.
like, man, this is so overpriced. Like they got to be making crazy money on this. And then you're like, well, they're probably paying a lot of rent for this place because it's right on the strip. And you're like, oh, I wonder what these employees are getting for like you look at the world totally different, and it's never the same after that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so once again, it's not for everybody, but for the ones that really enjoy it, the returns are out there for you to get, and everything's cumulative. That's the best part. I don't think that gets talked about enough. We talk about the compounding of money. There's also the compounding of knowledge. I mean, if you're doing this for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I mean, my gosh, imagine how much more intelligent you're going to be in 20 years from now than you are today. You're going to look back at yourself and be like, oh gosh, I didn't know anything about stocks back then, compared to what you know 10 years from now and 20 years from now, and those sorts of things. So it doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, because even an experienced investor makes mistakes, right? Warren Buffett still
Right.
makes mistakes. Like he's been doing this for a million years. So, but anyway, so that's kind of my thoughts on that. But it's fun. I enjoy it as much now as ever, and it's so much easier, man. Conference calls. There's a conference call app.
Yeah.
You literally
Yeah, dude.
pull it up. Yeah, and literally, boom, any conference call is playing on your phone within 5, 10 seconds. Like that's crazy, man.